Today's video is an updated video of the iconic Miss Lena Horne. She is so gorgeous, and people are easily mesmerized by Lena Horne's beauty and her vocals. So she has such a sweet, soothing voice and graced stages like a swan. Jazz scholar and author Stanley Crouch described her saying she had a luminous, restrained presence that most superstars try to pretend they have, but she really had it, end quote.
She's a part of an era that was elegance, white tie and tail, satin dresses.
And out of that flurry came this face that just knocked me for a loop.
I had never seen anyone so sexy.
She was the first black movie star on the cover of a movie magazine.
Lena Horne had a difficult time with Hollywood. Despite all the beauty, glitz, and glamour, and she walked away several times and faced a lot of depression and sadness. Later on in life, she would say, and I quote, "I was never able to enjoy this damn thing. It was always a hassle, a fight," end quote. Today's video, we are going to talk about her history of just the trouble that Hollywood put her through. Her jealous mother, that one just broke my heart. Her marrying a white man just to boost her career, and the controversy surrounding that. And we are also going to talk about a dirty little secret that Hollywood did and still do today. Well, actually two dirty secrets to pander to certain communities. You won't believe it. But before we get into all that first, hey friend, welcome to my channel, Karine, Alourde, where we deep dive and break down the most iconic stars through history. If you're not yet subscribed, please be sure to do so. And if you're already subscribed, please turn on your notification bell so you never miss an upload. Now, without further ado, let's get into this video. But before we get into her childhood and all the details, I do want to give you guys a few fun facts about Miss Lena Horne, her hobbies and beauty secrets. So her hobbies include writing, painting, and she loved to cook. Her favorite food, which I don't know why, is stinky tofu. Comment below if you've ever had stinky tofu or if you like it. And then she also loved ketchup, which is interesting. Like, do any of you guys just love ketchup? Her favorite color was also black, so leave a black heart in the comments for her. Now, in terms of beauty, in Horne's first screen test for Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, her skin was so light that the studio was concerned she might be mistaken for a white woman. Makeup artist Max Factor created a makeup line called Dark Egyptian to help Horne pass as black, so they actually darkened her skin. From her head down to her toes, they made her about 3 shades darker than what she already was. Oftentimes, Lena would look muddy, but over time they perfected the shade. This led many to believe that Lena Horne was probably not even a black woman for real, but a white woman passing as black. You know, MGM was good for creating new identities for their stars, down to who their families were, and falsified baby pictures even. Many in the black community accused Lena Horne of infiltrating the community through the means of Hollywood. This was one of Hollywood's dirty little secrets that they would do with mixed women. But we will dive deeper into this later on in the video, because there is a lot to unpack and I am curious to know your thoughts. But back to her beauty, Lena Horne suffered a lot in Hollywood due to her looks. It was a blessing and a curse. She wasn't accepted anywhere, not from the whites and not from the blacks. She constantly had to fight when it came to her beauty. On the first day she arrived at MGM's hair and makeup department, the hair and makeup people refused to work on her. They did not know what to do with a quote-unquote black woman's hair, even though her hair texture was fine, like many of the white actresses of MGM. Her hair was more fine than Ava Gardner's even, actually, and they still discriminated against her. Sidney Gilroth, the legendary hairdresser who was then head of hairdressing at MGM, announced to his staff that he would personally take care of Miss Horne. Jack Dawn, the head makeup artist, followed suit. She always had hidden angels that would eventually come to her rescue. When it came to makeup, Lena loved a pop of color in her lips, but natural everywhere else. She was already wearing such heavy foundation that she didn't like eyeshadows too much or too much blush. Her signature glossy red lipstick was paired with perfectly coiffed 1940s updos, always elegant, with every hairpin placed in perfect position. In the 1950s, Lena created Lena Horne Cosmetics, a line with over 42 products, including makeup, such as mascara, fragrances, and collections for bath, hair, and skincare, all housed in beautiful gold packaging with her name sprawled across in a dreamy 50s font face. After all that she suffered, she wanted to have her own. Can we blame her? And also, when it came to fashion, she was known for her elegant gowns and her body shape, her silhouette in those gowns. She was just well loved for that. Her gowns were always very well form fitted, very glitzy, very glamorous. She just looked stunning in anything that she wore. But let's jump to her childhood. She had a rather sad childhood. Horne was born on June 30th, 1917 in Brooklyn, New York. I know she's very fair-skinned, and at first glance, especially in her black and white pictures, you might not know that she's black, and she also has fine hair, but both sides of her family were African American. They did have a little mixed race in them, okay? But she was black. Let's just stop with that. She was black. She grew up pretty wealthy to upper middle class, well-educated black people. As Horne once put it, and I quote, "I came from one of the first families of Brooklyn," end quote. Her lineage is linked to John C. Calhoun, who was the 7th Vice President of the United States. John C. Calhoun's family owned slaves, and they also slept with the slaves and created, the fairer mulatto. So her father was a gambler who owned a hotel and a restaurant. He was pretty bad with money, but also knew how to keep getting more of it. Her mother was an actress who traveled a lot, so could barely be around to raise Lena. Her mother had dreams of becoming a star herself, and she was just desperately trying to be famous. She was so desperate for fame to the point where she would often abandon Lena just to be raised by other people. Of course, young Lena resented that and felt like her mother was very self-absorbed and chose to pursue a glamorous life over raising her. Her father left the family when Lena was only 3 years old because his gambling problems developed into much, much worse, which was just terrible. So because of this resulted in Horne being mostly raised by her grandparents, Cora Calhoun and Edwin Horne. Because remember, her mother chose to seek fame instead of being consistent in the life of Lena Horne. Before Horne found stability with her grandparents, she moved around a lot. At the age of 5, she was sent to live in Georgia for a while. She lived with her uncle, who was the dean of students at a college in Fort Valley, Georgia. But Lena was not happy there and needed more stability. But she credits her time in Georgia with her uncle to exposing her to many educated people of color. Horne's grandmother, Cora Calhoun, was well known in her community as an active supporter of many civil rights causes, and she took Lena to meetings of the NAACP, the Urban League, and the suffragette organizations, which fought for women's rights, so that's where she got her activism kickstart. Her grandmother is who actually instilled pride inside of Lena and made sure she never forgot her roots. When Lena was 12, she moved back with her mother to New York, where she later attended St. Peter Claver School. She later went to an all-girls high school where she did end up dropping out. She dropped out to go work at the Cotton Club, and as soon as she became 18, she went to live with her father in Pittsburgh.
All my life, I've been looking for a family, beginning at the age of 3 when my parents divorced. Throughout my childhood, they pursued their own lives with little time for me. My father into the sporting life on the fringes of the rackets. My mother chasing her fairy tale dreams of life in the theater. The only stabilizing influences in my life were my Brooklyn grandparents, stalwart members of the black bourgeoisie. Their home was a periodic refuge from being shunted from one group of strangers to another, mostly in the South, while my mother was on the road. My nomadic childhood taught me to hide my feelings. I would smile and try hard to fit in, but I mostly felt like an outsider. My favorite books were always about orphans. I became very secretive. I became very suspicious of everyone. I became unable to be my real self. I was 15 when my grandmother died. I felt I'd lost the core of me. The daughter of an ex-slave, she became a college graduate and a social activist. She taught me to love learning, and I dreamed of being a teacher. So I cried when my mother pulled me out of school to work at the Cotton Club, which was really a form of indentured servitude. On top of that, my mother was with me and determined to protect my virtue and her dreams of stardom for me. She kept me as isolated as she could. My longing for a normal childhood was never fulfilled, except for a brief time back in Brooklyn with my grandmother before she died. But that was the only time I felt I belonged somewhere. There I had a family, friends, a home, and a chance to see my father from time to time. I felt protected, and I knew who I was. I was a Horne from Brooklyn. All that was lost to me when my mother put me in the Cotton Club. With it, I lost my sense of wholeness. In its place, I was left with anger and an invisible wall I put up between me and the world. My life has been about surviving. Along the way, I also became an artist.
Her father lived in the prestigious little Harlem where all the movers and shakers lived. There is where she learned music from native Pittsburghers Billy Strayhorn and Billy Eckstein. Lena, like her mother, started to have a hunger for fame in the spotlight. She told her father that she wanted to be an actress, and her father was heavily against it. And this is a direct quote from her. She said, and I quote, "I told him I was going to be a movie star. He said, 'Lena, I'm going to buy you a house and most of all, a maid, because that's the role you'll be playing. So you might as well know what a real maid does,' end quote. During those days, if you were African American, you only played maids in movies. So that's why her father was so against it. Also, her family was very wealthy and thought Hollywood was for harlots who didn't mind being used by the system. Lena could have whatever she wanted. Why would she want to be, a Hollywood harlot? Basically, that's how they saw her, go be degraded in the system. As far as her career goes, in 1933, Lena joined the chorus line of the Cotton Club in New York City. There, she soaked in a lot of knowledge and experience, built up a stage presence. In the spring of 1934, she had her first feature role starring Adelaide Hall, who took Lena under her wings. Lena made her first screen appearance as a dancer in a musical cab at Calloway's Jitterbug Party, and the rest was history. She starred as the Bronze Venus in the movie The Dukes is Top, and in 1942, Lena became the first Black performer to sign a contract with a major film studio, MGM. According to Lena, her father came to Los Angeles and marched right into MGM executive mayor's office. Less than pleased, he said, "Mr. Mayor, it is a great privilege you're offering my daughter, but I can buy my daughter her own maid." He was just jiving, you understand, she told TV host Dick Cavett in 1981. Mayor promised to never cast Lena as a maid or a jungle maiden, and he did keep his promise.
The NAACP had waited 25 years for a weapon to break the color line in Hollywood, and they decided I was it, mostly because of my looks. They wanted to broaden the opportunities for Black actors, who at the time were pretty much restricted to menial parts. They also wanted to break the unions, which didn't allow Blacks behind the camera or on a sound stage. It's true, me and the shoeshine guy were the only Black people out there. Roger Edens, a talented part of the MGM Freed unit, saw me perform at a nightclub and arranged for me to audition for L.B. Mayer. And my dad walks in and he's sharp, he was. And he said, "Mr. Mayer, it's a great privilege you're offering my daughter." He says, "But I can buy my own daughter her own maid." He was just jiving, you understand? "I don't want her to be insulted. It's very nice, but she's not going to be in a Tarzan picture and run around in a leopard skin." Well, my father was from... And I don't think Mr. Mayer had ever been approached by a Black man like that. So he just sat. I became the first Black to be signed to a long-term studio contract, 7 years. My signing this contract and their hearing that I would not do certain kind of work got me into a lot of trouble with Black actors. They had meetings about it. They called me up. I had to appear in front of them. It was a rough time for everybody. And that was very unnerving to me at first.
Imagine being a woman alone in those days, always being a forerunner, always being the first, always having the public eye upon you. So you could never really be yourself. You always had to be what other people wanted you to be.
They wanted me to be exemplary, Walter White and these other people, because that made it seem like I was representing all the Black women in the world. It's a heavy job, Panama Hattie got lukewarm reviews, but the critics seemed to notice me, even though they didn't know who I was, since I wasn't credited in the film. Who's the new Latin singer, everybody was asking. Well, MGM may have wanted to pass me off as Latin, but when my own people accused me of trying to pass, I was furious, and I felt more isolated than ever. There was no family for me out there. Cabin in the Sky and later Stormy Weather were the only movies in which I played a character who was involved with the plot. Because those movies had all black casts, there was no mixing of races, so they could be shown anywhere. In every other film, I just sang a song or two, mostly playing myself, so that those scenes could be cut out for Southern audiences.
In a Vanity Fair article written by Hadley Hall Mears, they stated that Horne's mother, Edna, a failed actress, was extremely jealous of her increasingly famous daughter. Her mother moved to LA when she saw all the success Lena started to get, but she came to LA for a different reason. She wanted a career like Lena, and she would do whatever was necessary to get it. She started to blackmail Lena and said if Lena didn't cooperate, she would sell the press a story about a selfish girl who climbed to stardom on her mother's shoulders, then tossed her aside. The audacity. Can you imagine your mother abandoning you and not playing a role in raising you, but coming back to threaten you like this? Unfortunately, this is a case in Hollywood. When someone gets famous, there is always a deadbeat waiting to tarnish their name through blackmail. So while her daughter could not make her a star, she did end up paying her mother off, and she said, "I worked out a solution with a lawyer," end quote. Horne would later write in her memoir about the experience and how heartbroken she was. That is just terrible. You didn't even really try to raise her. You had many different people raise her. She was being tossed around in different homes, and only to blackmail her when she finally made it. This is why they say sometimes it be your own family, your own mother, your own blood. You just gotta distance yourself. She was signed by MGM Studio, where her official movie debut with MGM was Panama Hattie, where she gave us the iconic song Stormy Weather.
Don't know why, stormy weather, gloom and misery everywhere, stormy weather.
She is known for this little number, and it really placed her on the map. So a full circle moment, the movie was loosely based on Adelaide Hall, who took Lena Horne under her wings at the Cotton Club. So my favorite Lena Horne film was Cabin in the Sky. She just looks so stunning in it, and that came in 1943. So let's talk a little bit about the discrimination that she faced. She never got a featured leading role because she was black. The films had to be edited in a way that would not cause controversy because several cities had theaters that refused to show films with black performers. This is why most of her scenes in movies, if you watch during that era, was her alone without anyone else. That way the editors could easily remove her or edit the scenes out without anyone really noticing. That's pretty tragic. According to an article from The Atlantic written by John Maroney, it says that from the beginning, Horne was troubled by her inability to fit in anywhere. She refused to play the maid and the sensualized Jezebel roles usually reserved for black actresses of her time, and that kind of narrowed her prospects in Hollywood. At the time, many black artists accused her of using her lighter skin to pass. Horne herself was ambivalent about her looks. She said, and I quote, "I came from one of the first families of Brooklyn, yet it was the RAPE of slave women by their masters, which accounted for our white blood, which in turn made us a Negro society," end quote. So she was saying, y'all giving me flack for being a mulatto, but y'all don't understand the pain that came with that. Like, our mothers had to be taken advantage of. They slept with them forcefully, and that's how we came to be. So it wasn't pleasant for us either. What are you guys not understanding? That was her argument. She had light skin, so when she played lead roles alongside dark-skinned men, the studio asked the makeup department to darken her skin. Unfortunately, the makeup hindered the advancement of minority women in the film industry. It didn't take long for studios to use the makeup to darken white women in order for them to play minority roles in all-white casts. They did this with Ava Gardner, who actually took a role that Lena was supposed to have. They used the makeup to darken Ava's skin so that she could pass as a mixed woman instead of a white woman. This was another way Hollywood was taking opportunities from black actresses and actors in another form of blackface. And also, darker-skinned women were upset that Lena was actually agreeing to have her skin darkened. But at the same time, white people were uncomfortable with how white-passing Lena was, and they wanted her to be differentiated. They just weren't comfortable with a black woman looking this white, and black people weren't comfortable with a black woman looking this white. So you can't win. She was too light for the white people and not dark enough for the black people. What could she have done? So in a lot of her older movies, they really did darken her skin. She was not that dark. She was really actually a little bit more pale, and she would be whiter even than some of the white actresses of her day. It must be a tough spot to be in. She just couldn't be herself. And despite this, Lena Horne kept working hard and she kept pushing. She went on to star inside Phil Foley's, which was another good one. She went after the role of Julie Laverne in the film Showboat, but they gave the role to Ava Gardner because at that time, interracial romance on films were banned. So Ava Gardner and Lena Horne were actually friends in real life, so this did hurt them both. And to add more salt to the wound, executives wanted Ava Gardner to use Lena's recordings and vocals to practice for the movie. This did offend Ava and Lena deeply, and they both tried to speak up. This led to actress Annette Warren's voice and recordings to be used instead of Lena's. So MGM could have easily used Lena, but they preferred to just go with a knockoff, and Ava Gardner was quoted as saying, "Why didn't they just use you if they were going to do all of this anyway?"
So when they were casting the movie many years later, I naturally assumed I would get that part, and I really wanted it. But Hollywood racism was still rampant. Instead, they chose Ava Gardner, my best white girlfriend out there, put dark makeup on her, created especially for me, dubbed her with somebody else's voice, and she played Julie. It was a great disappointment to me. The other black actors finally were friendly when they saw that I wasn't doing any bigger parts than they were. And I saw that my situation was just like my father thought. They're going to give you this one part, and that's it. And he was telling the truth. They hadn't made me a maid, but they hadn't made me into anything else either.
And for you guys saying, well, why didn't Ava Gardner just decline the role? They were very limited in those contracts. Once you signed, you can't work with another company. You had a certain limit of movies you had to do with them. You couldn't decline certain roles at times. So this is why Lena Horne's father was so adamant about talking to Mayer, saying that you cannot have my daughter in these roles if you're going to have her under contracts. Because if he didn't do that before she signed, they probably would have forced her legally to do those roles. So it's not like Ava really had much of a choice, and they still remained friends. Did you guys know that they were so close, in fact, that Frank Sinatra, when he was married to Ava Gardner, thought that Lena Horne and Ava Gardner were actually lovers? And they spoke so fondly of each other that when Ava Gardner passed away, Lena Horne was so distraught, and she was like, "Why did she leave me? The audacity of her to just die like that," end quote. They were very close friends. Ava would tell Lena all of her secrets and vice versa, and they would spend so much time together that their husbands would always be jealous and suspicious. No one could really get in between those two, which is why I think the studio was being cruel when they gave that role to Ava. It was to break Lena's spirit because they knew just how close they were. But fortunately, this only bonded them closer, and Ava always spoke about how deeply she regretted it. Ava was also good friends with Dorothy Dandridge too. I did a video for Ava and Dorothy Dandridge. I'll link in the end cards. Lena Horne was also very close to Judy Garland also, which I did a video for also, and Lena got along pretty well with the women in Hollywood. It was actually the men that got under her skin. So let's talk about her hate towards Hollywood. Everything that was happening really angered and hurt Lena deeply. The magic of Hollywood was dwindling for her, and she lost the fire for it. The passion for it was just gone with each new attack. So she started to focus on her nightclub performances instead. She said she was tired of being typecast as a Negro who stands against a pillar singing a song, which is really what they did. They put a pillar there, a pole, and she would stand against it singing, but she never had any speaking roles. She said, "I did that 20 times too often," which is very sad. She was blackballed during the 50s for her connections in the 1940s with communist-backed groups, and she did denounce these groups later on in life, but she was also blackballed because she started to become too vocal in general. She was known as a woman who just wouldn't shut up, especially when it came to civil rights matters. Horne was active in the civil rights movement for many years. She was all about integration, like integrating the two races. So in 1941, she performed at Cafe Society, New York City's first integrated venue, and according to her biography, she refused to perform for segregated audiences. She spoke and performed on a march in Washington on behalf of the NAACP and the National Council of Negro Women, and she also worked with Eleanor Roosevelt to pass anti-lynching laws. She returned to Hollywood on her own terms, playing Claire Quintana, a madam in a brothel in the film Death of a Gunfighter, and that was released in 1969. She went on to play the Good Witch Glinda in the movie The Wiz. It was an all-black adaptation of The Wizard of Oz with Michael Jackson and Diana Ross, which I did videos for both. Lena Horne established herself as one of the most sought-after nightclub performers of the post-war era. After leaving Hollywood, she performed at a variety of clubs and hotels in the United States, Canada, and Europe, including the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas, the Coconut Grove in Los Angeles, and the Waldorf Astoria in New York. Lena Horne at the Waldorf Astoria, a live album released in 1957, became the best-selling record by a female artist in the history of the RCA Victor label. So Horne was the first African-American woman nominated for a Tony Award for Best Actress and a musical for her part in the Calypso musical Jamaica. In addition, Lena Horne appeared on television shows such as The Muppet Show, Sesame Street, and Sanford & Son, as well as The Cosby Show in 1985 and A Different World in 1993. At 63, Lena Horne planned to retire from show business. She went on tour for 2 months for a string of benefit concerts sponsored by the sorority Delta Sigma Theta in the summer of 1980, but of course she didn't really stop working. She went on to win 2 Grammy Awards as well as a Tony Award. She received the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 1995. A live album of her performances was released, winning a Grammy Award for Best Jazz Vocal Album. Horne's second studio album was released in 1998. Horne retired from performing and disappeared from public view after that, and in 2003, ABC announced that Janet Jackson was supposed to star as Lena Horne in the television version of the biopic, but soon that's when Janet Jackson had the whole wardrobe malfunction during the 2004 Super Bowl, and Variety reported that Lena Horne demanded Jackson be removed from the project. So Oprah Winfrey did campaign for Alicia Keys to take on the role, which Alicia Keys to me very much looked like Lena. She does favor her. She would do really good with that. Comment below. I mean, if they're going to do it, they better do it now, you know? So during a 2005 interview on the Oprah Winfrey Show, Oprah stated that she might possibly consider producing the biopic herself, casting Keys as Horne. Comment below if you would be here for this. I think Alicia actually was a better choice than Janet because they really do favor her down to the nose and stuff. But they better do that now before it's too late because she got to play younger Lena, you know? So as far as her marriage go, Lena had affairs with 25-time heavyweight champion Joe Louis and actor Artie Shaw, Orson Welles, as well as director Vincent Minnelli, and I did a video for Orson Welles. So Lena, like many women at the time, married young at 19, and to the first man she ever dated, she married Louis Jordan Jones, a political operative, in 1937 in Pittsburgh. They had a daughter in December 1937, and they had a son in February 1940, who unfortunately passed away due to kidney disease in 1970. Horne and her husband Jones eventually separated in 1940, and they divorced in 1944.
I ran away and got married, woefully unprepared to be a wife. My husband, Louis Jones, was an aspiring politician looking for a well-trained wife. Not surprisingly, we weren't well suited. Money problems forced me to accept a movie in Hollywood. When I got back, it was clear that despite the 2 children we had, our marriage was over. And when I left, he said, "All right, go. You can take Gail, but you'll never get Teddy."
Later on, she married Lenny Hayton, a music director and one of MGM's premier musical conductors and arrangers, in Paris in December 1947, and she did say France is her favorite place to visit, so it's cute that they got married there. This did cause a lot of controversy because he was white, and during these times there was still a lot of racial tension because of this. They did not announce their marriage until 3 years later, and you guys know there was tension because they already felt weird about Lena Horne to begin with, so it was like, oh look, she went and married a white man. They did end up separating in the early 1960s, but they never got divorced. He passed away in 1970, and in her autobiography, Lena, written by Richard Schickel, Horne recounts the enormous pressure she and her husband faced as an interracial couple. She later admitted in an interview in Ebony that she had married Hayden to advance her career and cross the color barrier in show business, but learned to love him very much.
Interracial marriages were illegal in California at that time, so we decided to go to Europe and to get married in Paris. I married Lenny, I guess for selfish reasons. I knew that a white man could get me into places that black men couldn't. But you know, I learned to love him completely because he took all this out from me and went along with the flow and made me at times forget he was white.
In 1981, she told the New York Times he could get me into places no black manager could. It was wrong of me, but as a black woman, I knew what I had against me. But she said because he was a nice man and because he was in my corner, I began to love him, and many people did that back then, end quote. I mean, she wasn't lying. Black men married white women and black women married white men just so they could have more opportunities in the industry. That's another little dark industry secret. It was a signal that, hey, I'm a good black person. That won't cause too much trouble because, see, I married one of you. I don't mind assimilating, end quote. Marrying interracially was beneficial for the white man or woman in the industry because now they had the black market as well. Black people were starting to have tremendous buying power in the film and music industry. So all the white artists didn't want to just be labeled a white artist or film star, but a universal one that appealed to both black, white, Asians, no matter who you were. And you know, you do that by intermarrying. Would you believe me if I said this still happens today, especially in the entertainment industry? The black men always get an all-American white wife, and the black woman gets a non-threatening white husband when they want to propel their career. It's like a winning formula. So she did this, and she had no problems just admitting, yeah, that's what I did. I wanted to further my career, and that's just what I did. When she made those statements, she did suffer a lot of backlash where it was like, hey, you're kind of like your mother, you know? You basically used this guy and said, well, I learned to love him. I didn't marry for love. I married to get ahead. And there was a lot of black women that was like, oh, she learned from white women how to be hypergamous, you know, and married to further her career, not really for love. Like, they had a lot of hate for it. But I mean, I like Lena Horne because she was honest. She was honest, you know. A lot of them were not honest, and there's a lot of them, like the Pearl Baileys. You had people like Eartha Kitt and the rest of them that went on with white men too. They weren't bold and said that's what they were doing, but that's what they did. They did suffer backlash. But because Lena was so vocal about it, and because she was just like really passing, if it wasn't for the makeup and a lot of these pictures you're seeing, and you know, but in her older age, she did get a little bit more tanner, but I think that played a role in the backlash that she got, you know, while others didn't really suffer the same type of backlash. Comment below your thoughts. Do you think she was selfish and like her mother for doing that, or girl, do what you gotta do? I'm pro, hey, it was what was happening in the time. I believe in marriage and the sanctity of it and all of that, you know. But in Hollywood, I don't expect famous people or Hollywood people to take marriage seriously. And I do think it was a game of, hey, look out for yourself, climb to the top. And she did what she had to do to be at the heights of it. And people still do that today. Maybe not in Hollywood and maybe not to marry interracially, but people still marry for stability, for other reasons outside of love, you know? Comment below your thoughts. Horne passed on due to congestive heart failure on May 9th, 2010, but she did live a very long life, and she lived until the age of 92. She still looked good, her skin, her face, and I don't believe she ever touched her face. She just always looked good. She aged very gracefully. Even though people speculated she touched her nose, nope, she always denied this, and you can see in baby pictures that her nose was always like this. Her remains were cremated. She still continues to be an icon today. Lena Horne is just one of those icons that deserve her flowers, a natural beauty. She fought for inclusion, and she was one of the first black women to get a major studio deal, and she never played a maid, and I love that for her. Also, one of the criticisms that she got, like if you look on these other sites and stuff, is that, wow, now her line has completely erased any black features from them, because she married, her kids ended up, I believe, in marrying, you know, white also, and kept on to where any traces of being black is no longer in her lineage. So people today in today's era still criticize her for that. And I don't know, comment below your thoughts. That's part of the thing with being mixed. People can't help who they love or who they marry to or who they're in close proximity to. But that is the thing with being mixed, that you can decide to further your black side by marrying black and continuing to have black children, or you can erase that and further your white side by marrying white and continuing to have white children, you know? So you literally get to choose the destiny of your kids and your future generations. And we can't be mad at people for choosing either or. if they marry who they want to marry, and they made their choices based on who they made their choices with. So comment below your thoughts on that. I'm curious to know your thoughts on that. I don't have any feelings. I just let people be. Whatever that they want to do, let them do. Everybody's grown, right? But comment below your thoughts. Check out my Ava Gardner or Dorothy Dandridge videos if you haven't seen those yet. I'm thinking about doing an updated video for Dorothy Dandridge as well, so be on the lookout for that. I just want to update these videos, the sound and all of that, stuff with them. So comment below what other videos you guys would like to see, and maybe in the future you could still watch my Dorothy Dandridge video now, but there may be an updated one coming soon. I love you guys so much. If you like the music you're listening to, the link is in the description. I will see you guys in the next one.